Have you ever brought something home without thinking twice? Sometimes it's nothing more than a quilt, a sewing machine, a mannequin, or a doll with a name that you never asked for. Every item has a past, history behind it. Sometimes the past doesn't stay where it came from, and every once in a while, you realize that the objects carry more than just dust and memories. Some stories refuse to end quietly, and sometimes the things we keep start keeping us. Last year, I went antique shopping at a flea market in a town near mine. It was during a pretty stressful time in my life, so I was just trying to get my mind off of the worries for a while. One of the things that I found was an old plastic doll that looked like it was from the 1940s or 50s. She had a handmade dress and shoes. Her hair looked and felt real. It was glued onto her scalp with a wig cap that looked like it was cut from an old flour sack. Her tiny teeth were sculpted separately and inside of her mouth. It looked like some sort of composite material inside her head. For some reason, I was smitten, almost like I was drawn to her. I had to have her. I picked her up and I held her tight in my arms as I continued to browse around. The last room I found myself in was a particularly quiet room, much quieter than the rest. This room was full of old, extremely creepy furniture from who knows where or when. Looking back on it now and thinking about the feeling I got when walking through that room, even though I didn't buy anything, I may have brought something home with me anyways, but I have no way of being sure. Once I got home, I decided to work on cleaning up the doll, washing her hair and recurling it to get the frizz out. After I pinned her hair into curls, I stood her on my dresser to completely let her dry, which was right next to my bed. That first night, trying to sleep, I couldn't get my mind off of her. I couldn't stop thinking about her no matter how hard I tried. I would try to think of other things, anything. Hell, I even gave counting sheep a shot, but it's like the doll was forcing my mind to think of her. At least that's the best way I can describe the feeling. When I finally got to sleep, I kept having the most random rapid dreams, almost like fever dreams. But in the midst of them, I remember seeing the doll. She came to me and she said her name, Sybil. I have no idea where that name could have come from in my mind. It felt very out there, that's for sure. On the second day, whenever I would walk into my room, I kept seeing dark shadows dash in the corners of my eyes. Like I mentioned before, I was dealing with a lot of stress at the time, and at first I believed that was making me see things. But while I was taking Sybil's pin curls out and smoothing her hair, I was looking into her eyes and something even weirder happened. I felt a sudden sharp jab of pain in my lower back. I got a really uneasy feeling, so I put her back on my dresser and left my room for the rest of the day. That night was very similar to the first night. More rapid flurry dreams, tossing and turning, not being able to sleep, waking up the next morning and feeling drained again, but still unable to get her off of my mind. Day 3 was the breaking point for me. That night, as usual, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Then, out of nowhere, my entire body started convulsing, shaking uncontrollably. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, and I didn't do anything that would make me shiver like that. There is no medical history of seizures that run in my entire family. The room wasn't cold, it was quite the opposite actually. I just had this horrible feeling of dread, knowing that she was sitting on the shelf behind me, while I was in such a vulnerable state, shaking on the floor, unable to get up. Once I was finally able to stand up, I sprinted out of my room and downstairs. I crashed into the couch as my legs gave out and the shaking began again. For the next hour, I was glued to my couch, not able to move. Once I was able to safely get up, I went to visit my mom, who was in the hospital at that time, which is one of the reasons I was so stressed. When I told her about how I was feeling, about the doll, about the dreams that I was having, and the uncontrollable shaking, she immediately got a bad feeling and told me that I needed to get rid of the doll. So that's what I did. When I returned home, I decided to seal the doll with incense, telling whatever was attached to it to stay with the doll wherever it went next. I sealed Sybil away into a box and I gave her to a thrift store in the next town. As soon as she was out of the house, my room felt lighter, no more seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes, and I was able to sleep fine that night. I don't know if Sybil is still there, and honestly, I'm in no hurry to go see. Whatever was attached to that doll It fed on the stress and fear that I was drowning in, and I'm just grateful that I got rid of her when I did, before any serious harm could come from Sybil's wrath. One evening, I was walking home from work and I noticed someone's belongings in their driveway. On a bookshelf, I read a sign saying something like, "Free to a good home." I enjoy sewing, and these people had left some antique sewing machines out, which intrigued me. As I was looking at them and wondering why the owner just didn't try to sell them, a man approached me. He noticed that I had taken an interest in the sewing machines. He told me their landlord sold their house and that they only had a couple weeks before they had to move out, so they were just giving their possessions away for free to get rid of them quickly so they could be ready for the move. After chatting with him for a few minutes, his wife appeared from the doorway, bringing out another armful of their belongings. Naturally, we struck up a conversation as well. She told me that she was pagan and really enjoyed sewing. So, we stood there and talked sewing for a while. I lost track of time, and the next thing I know, I'm being given a tailor's mannequin, a vintage hotel busboy outfit, and two pretty old antique sewing machines. The husband bundled everything into his car and offered to drop it off at my place for me, which was just around the corner. My mom wasn't happy about the situation. The sewing machines ended up in the attic for a little while, but they were eventually donated to a charity shop. The busboy outfit went to the trash. The only thing that she let me keep was the mannequin, and that went in my bedroom. Not long after the mannequin had been given its new home in my bedroom, I noticed a terrible stench of stale urine and sulfur on several occasions. My room had no reason to smell like that, so naturally the only thing that I could think of was most likely because of the mannequin, as it joined as the smell had started. I then started getting a bad feeling in my gut when I would go near the mannequin. I began waking up several times in the night feeling uneasy. It wasn't fear in a dramatic sense, it was more like a heavy dread sitting on my chest. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even though I knew I was alone. Then came the sounds. I kept hearing small sounds in my room at night, like light tapping or something brushing fabric. I checked everything, the windows, the pipes, the vents, nothing explained it, and every time I glanced towards the mannequin, that uneasy feeling intensified. About 2 weeks later, and a lot of sleepless nights, I couldn't cope anymore, so I took the mannequin apart and put it in the bin. Everything went back to normal that night, and the smell of stale urine and sulfur disappeared, and it has never returned. I don't know what was wrong with that mannequin, but the change was immediate. Since then, I've been careful about what I bring into my home. Some things feel like they come with more than just dust and history. Sometimes when I walk past where the mannequin used to sit, I still get a little chill, like a reminder not to bring home strangers' things again. I'm hijacking my significant other's story, with his permission of course, since he doesn't have Reddit. His mom bought an old quilt at a flea market. It was a nice one, handmade and dirt cheap. She put it in the guest room, which was basically the dog's room at the time. They loved that room. They played in there, napped in there. If you needed to find them, they were probably in there. It was basically their space. As soon as the quilt went in, they stopped going in. They would stand at the doorway and growl or bark, which was very unlike them. Things started coming off of the shelves. You'd set something down and later find it halfway across the room. Sometimes there would be bangs on the walls with no explanation. One night, his grandmother stayed over. Because of her back, she got to sleep in his bed and he slept in the guest room with the quilt. The next morning, he woke up covered in scratches. His mom started feeling uneasy after that. Not a nightmare, nothing dramatic, just a heavy, instinctive feeling that something was wrong. One night, she woke up suddenly, heart racing, wide awake. When she walked past the guest room, it felt off. The dogs were standing there, ears pinned back, staring into the doorway, refusing to go near it. The next morning, she didn't say anything to anyone. She just picked up the quilt, took it outside, and threw it away. Immediately, everything stopped. No more noises, no more objects moving, and the dogs went back to normal. They never had a problem since, though sometimes the old antique radio, that still turns on by itself. Nobody uses that room anymore, and when the radio starts playing, they just ignore it and wait for it to stop on its own. No one goes in to check. Some things are better left undisturbed.